June 21st, 1582, the most powerful man in Japan was dead, murdered by his own general. 200 kilometers away, his greatest commander received the news in silence. 13 days later, the killer was gone, and the sandal-bearer's son owned Japan. How? On June 21st, 1582, Japan's most powerful warlord was murdered. 13 days later, his killer was dead, and a peasant's son had taken everything. What happened in those 13 days changed Japan forever. To understand what Hideyoshi did, you must first understand where he was. In June 1582, he was at the height of his military power, 400 kilometers west of Kyoto, commanding the siege of Takamatsu Castle. He had engineered a masterpiece, redirecting rivers to flood the castle's surrounding fields, turning it into an island fortress, slowly starving the garrison into surrender. Victory was within days. The Western campaign was nearly complete. Everything was going exactly according to plan. Meanwhile, in Kyoto, Oda Nobunaga was preparing to join the Western campaign. He had stopped at Honnoji Temple for the night, accompanied by only a small personal guard. His generals were scattered across Japan. His armies were days away. Nobunaga, who had survived 20 years of constant warfare through ruthless calculation, had made one catastrophic miscalculation. He had trusted Akechi Mitsuhide. Before dawn, on June 21st, Akechi Mitsuhide reversed his army. His men had been marching to reinforce the Western campaign. He turned them around and pointed them at Kyoto. His reason has never been definitively established. Humiliation, ambition, a secret order from another faction. His words that night were recorded as, "The enemy is at Honnoji." His soldiers did not yet know who the enemy was. They would understand when they arrived. Honnoji burned before dawn. Nobunaga's small guard fought and died. Nobunaga himself, surrounded, the temple on fire, reportedly said simply, "It cannot be helped." He died in the flames. The man who had dismantled the old order of Japan, crushed the Buddhist militant movements, and come closer to national unification than anyone in a century, was gone between midnight and sunrise. Mitsuhide's soldiers stood in the ruins. He held Kyoto. He held 50,000 men. He had 13 days. The news traveled west by relay rider. A message that would reshape Japan passed through mountain checkpoints, across river crossings, down dirt roads cut through cedar forests, each rider pushing his horse to exhaustion before handing off to the next. At Takamatsu, Hideyoshi received the message in his command tent. He read it. He told no one. The soldiers outside continued their siege work. The flooded fields around Takamatsu reflected the morning sky.
Inside, Hideyoshi sat absolutely still.
What Hideyoshi did in the next 2 hours was the act of a man thinking at a speed no one around him could match. First, seal the information. If the Mori clan learned that Nobunaga was dead, they would immediately break the ceasefire and attack, and Hideyoshi's army would be destroyed between two enemies. Second, negotiate surrender immediately, before word could spread. He sent peace terms to the Takamatsu commander that were generous enough to be accepted within hours. The Mori never knew what had happened in Kyoto. By midday on June 22nd, one day after Nobunaga's death, Takamatsu had surrendered. Then Hideyoshi did something extraordinary. He revealed to his commanders for the first time what had actually happened in Kyoto. Before the shock had fully registered on their faces, he gave a single order. The army would march east. 200 kilometers under 12 days. The soldiers had spent weeks in a siege camp. They were about to cover the length of Western Japan in summer heat. No one questioned the order. The Chugoku Gaeshi, the Great Return, began on June 22nd. 30,000 men turned their backs on the Western Sea and began moving east through the mountain passes of the Chugoku Range. The pace Hideyoshi demanded was inhuman. 25 to 30 kilometers per day in summer heat on unpaved mountain roads, carrying weapons and armor. Villages along the route were requisitioned for food, water, and horses. Soldiers who collapsed were carried. Those who could not be carried were left. The army did not stop. Day 5. Day 7. The army moved with a focus that observers would later describe as almost supernatural. Hideyoshi rode at the front, pushing his horse as hard as any other. He sent ahead riders to commandeer fresh horses at each town. He organized supply trains so that food and water met the column at pre-arranged points. He was solving, in real time, a logistics problem that would have broken most commanders before it began. The men followed because they understood, consciously or not, that they were watching something extraordinary. In Kyoto, Akechi Mitsuhide was not idle. He spent the 13 days attempting to build alliances, dispatching messengers to other warlords, seeking recognition as Nobunaga's legitimate successor. Almost none responded. The great lords of Japan were watching. One by one, Mitsuhide's messengers returned empty-handed. He held 50,000 men and the capital, but he held them alone. He had 13 days. He had spent 11 of them waiting for help that wasn't coming. On July 1st, day 10, Hideyoshi's army arrived at Yamazaki, near Osaka Bay. They had covered nearly 200 kilometers in 10 days. Reinforcements from other Oda commanders met them. Niwa Nagahide, Ikeda Tsuneyoki, thousands of additional men. Word was spreading through Japan. Nobunaga was dead. Hideyoshi was moving to avenge him. The army that had left Takamatsu at 30,000 swelled. By the time it moved toward Yamazaki on July 2nd, it numbered over 40,000. The Battle of Yamazaki was fought on July 2nd, 1582, at the narrowing between the Yodo River and the forested slopes of Mount Tenozan. Mitsuhide had positioned his forces on the high ground, hoping terrain would compensate for inferior numbers. Hideyoshi attacked with everything. Units that had just completed one of the longest forced marches in Japanese military history. The battle lasted less than an hour. Mitsuhide's lines broke. His army
dissolved.
Mitsuhide fled north into the forests. 3 days later, he was dead. Killed, according to tradition, by a band of armed peasants with bamboo spears while attempting to reach his home castle at Sakamoto. The man who had held Kyoto and commanded 50,000 men died in a roadside ambush, unrecognized, alone in the dark. He had held power for 13 days. History gave him a name that lasted far longer: Jusan Nichiten Kampaku, the 13-Day Lord. Hideyoshi did not rest. Within 4 days of Yamazaki, he convened the Kyosu Conference, a meeting of Nobunaga's senior commanders to determine succession. He arrived with a candidate already prepared, alliances already secured, and a clarity of purpose that left his rivals, older men of higher birth, unable to match his speed. The conference lasted 1 day. Hideyoshi had controlled the outcome before it began. In the space of 13 days, the sandal-bearer had positioned himself as the heir to the most powerful empire in Japan. What made those 13 days decisive was not just speed. It was the clarity of Hideyoshi's thinking under conditions that would have paralyzed most men. Each decision flowed from the one before with perfect logic. Conceal the news, negotiate the ceasefire, march east, secure reinforcements, fight before Mitsuhide could consolidate, convene the conference before rivals could organize. There was no wasted step, no hesitation. He had looked at the most chaotic moment in Japan's recent history and seen it as a straight line. Consider what Mitsuhide did with the same 13 days. He waited for allies who never came, held a capital that gave him no leverage, and allowed Hideyoshi to control the narrative. The betrayer of Nobunaga never understood that killing a man and inheriting his power are entirely separate problems. Hideyoshi understood both simultaneously from the moment he read the message in his tent at Takamatsu. One man had a sword and a capital. The other had a plan. The plan won. Those 13 days did not just end a betrayal. They launched a dynasty. The speed and decisiveness with which Hideyoshi avenged Nobunaga created a narrative almost impossible to challenge. He was Nobunaga's true heir, the man who had acted when no one else could. Rivals who might have contested the succession found themselves outmaneuvered before they had finished calculating their options. The 13 days were Hideyoshi's greatest act of political communication. Everything that followed, the Kampaku title, the Unification, the supreme power, rested on this foundation. Next time on Samurai Chronicles, we return to Japan's greatest swordsman. After 61 duels without a single defeat, Miyamoto Musashi spent his final years not fighting, but writing. Alone in a mountain cave, weeks before his death, he composed the Book of Five Rings, a philosophy of strategy that still shapes martial arts, business, and warfare 500 years later. What secrets did the undefeated warrior need to leave behind? If these 13 days gripped you, the speed, the calculation, the perfect execution under impossible pressure, subscribe to Samurai Chronicles for a new episode every day. Drop a comment. Could Hideyoshi have pulled this off without the element of surprise? We'll see you in the next battle.